And that's kind of the fun part about what's coming, right? We're like, oh no, we have all these problems that are going to come from AI. You're like, awesome. Because you know what we need? We need lots of problems that all of these producers can go solve. And I think that's what's exciting about AI. And no matter what side of the fence you're on of being like, oh no, this is going to be bad for me, or oh my God, this is going to be amazing for me, the thing to think about is those are the problems that we can all lean into and go solve now as a big group of people who have all these amazing tools to go do it. It's Slackers, unscripted business insight from two lifelong builders. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Jaime, and we are here to show you how big ideas travel across industries.
Consider it your weekly companion on a path to better work and a better way of working.
Every time a new technology shows up, the headlines swing between panic and utopia. With AI, it's either the end of work or it's the beginning of everything. But here is the truth. AI is not going to replace you. It's going to expose you. If your value as a worker is purely task-based, if it can be automated, it will be. But if you aspire to do meaningful human work rooted in judgment and creativity, AI can be a force multiplier and actually amplify your ability to deliver. Remember, AI can do a lot of tasks, but it can't tell you which tasks matter. It can execute, but it can't really discern. The real differentiator for builders and leaders is knowing what problems to solve and in what order. That's strategy, that's judgment, and that is uniquely human. So Jonathan, good to see you, man. Let me throw it to you right out of the gates. When people talk about AI, the headlines tend to be pretty extreme, right? It's the end of work or it's the future of everything. Why do you think the conversation gets so totally polarized?
It's funny. I feel like everything gets polarized this way. This is the world we live in, right? Which is, for better or for worse, it's either way over here or way over here is kind of where we tend to land. I think in the way we, tend to consume information, it's often in the first 5 or 10 seconds of how crazy this is, whether it's good or bad. So I think it's kind of natural at this point to see something like AI as being the incredible, powerful tool that it is and what it can unlock. And then how scary that might be if it happens, right? It just feels like, it's very easy to go to those places and be like, well, AI is going to be this magical thing that absolutely solves all problems we can possibly think of. And then there's the other one, which makes it feel like I'm going to be reduced to a meaningless worker if all things go wrong here. And I don't know what to do about that if that happens. It's very unlikely that either of those outcomes are going to be the thing where like there's just mass joblessness and all the opportunity goes away, or that unlimited good comes of AI and everything we can dream of happens, and everybody gets compensated for that and the world just continues to turn. So at a high level, I think a big part of this is just looking at AI as being one of the many new tools that have entered our lives in the last few decades, let's say. We watched as information was gate kept for a very long time, and then it just became everywhere with the internet, right? And then everyone has information, so there's a whole new dimension of things. And then there was everyone has a computer in their pocket that has access to everything. That's now a thing. You all have that. And by the way, it has cameras and every other thing that we used to have unique solutions for. It's all the same thing. And we carry that around and we do stuff with it. And here we look into the lens of AI, and it just is another extension of unlocking more and more and more people with a really, really powerful thing. And at least in the last few decades, as we've watched that happen quickly, where these aren't just generational changes, these are happening every 5 or 10 years or so. What tends to happen is when we give people access to new power, we see a lot of talent rise that we never knew where it was in the first place. And yeah, there's some people who were impacted in a negative way or whatever, but what we saw is that a new group of people arose, right? Like it's we've talked about things like when everyone has a camera, we find out who the really good photographers are. Like when everyone has access to AI, we're going to see where the ideas and the vision can really come from. And it's not just going to be from a handful of corporations. Like we saw a lot of the big solutions come, early in the 2000s, where we could have named on one hand all the big companies that were delivering everything. And then we started to have that be way more ubiquitous, and all the content creators and all the visionaries and the doers and the thinkers and people with big strategy were able to just do more, make their own things, do their own stuff. But until now, as we've looked at AI, there was key skills that we may not have had to where we could embrace it. We always had to be somewhat dependent on other disciplines. You might be a marketer and you needed a developer. You might be a developer and you need a designer. You might be a designer and you need a strategist or something. And it always took a lot of ingredients because all of those skills were difficult and expensive to obtain. And a lot of times that was reserved even for at least small companies, if not really, really big ones. And we're definitely moving into this phase where if you have vision and passion and creativity and strategy and a willingness to identify and solve problems, you're about to be handed a super powerful tool that's going to enable you to do these things and have way less dependencies and way less friction and way less cost. And to your point at the open of the show, absolutely, there's going to be certain types of functions that become automated going forward. Big companies will shrink down and start automating some of those those tasks. Small companies will be less likely to hire for those things because they can use that automation to grow without the hiring of those resources. But again, throughout history, we see this. Those displaced workers have a new opportunity. It's not just that the coal mine closed. It's that we are shutting down a section over here, but opening up maybe the biggest section of all time for people to hop in and be creative and solve problems and do without a lot of the restrictions that we've had in this, even as recently as 2-3 years ago.
So I think it might be a little helpful, I mean, even for my own brain, but maybe for anyone here listening to the conversation, to take a step back a bit and define AI in the context of how you and I are talking about it today. Because you and I have a unique bias in that we've worked in and around technology for a long time. So in many ways, we have spent a lot of time with artificial intelligence layers of some type, whether it's a recommendation engine or some sequencing algorithm in some other place. So arguably, it's sort of been around for a bit, and we've spent time in and around those areas. So when we talk about it today, let's talk a little bit about like what we're really trying to describe when we use the word AI. From my seat, right, I want to make sure that it's clear that a lot of what we're talking about in the context of this conversation has to do with the introduction of tools like ChatGPT, like Claude, like Perplexity, which is this natural human language layer that sits on top of an enormous wealth of data. Essentially, the entire data set of all human history, if you listen to some of the pitches, right, is now being stored on servers that can be interacted with through a layer of natural human language. So that tool is now public facing. You can use it for free. You can pay to have some sort of premium version of these various products. But when we talk about AI today, we're talking about that. Am I right? Like that kind of unique version of AI that is now widely available and accessible to effectively the everyman and woman.
Yeah, the tools I think are the real evolution for now, right? And to your point, in the old days, right, we would all refer to the AI as algorithms of some sort. We were like, oh, I need an algorithm that runs all these complex routines to make something hard a little bit easier or less for a person to do. And in a lot of ways, I think what most people's initial exposure to kind of like AI tools was like really sophisticated search. For a long time, we were trying to improve the way we have access to the world's information, but it was, somewhat difficult to get it exactly the thing that I wanted. And so we went from trying to locate a website or a document in a sea of things, and that was the secret sauce, right? Like, go find me a needle in a haystack. That was the task. And so as we got good at that tool that gave us that access to be like, I can go fairly reliably, I can go find the needle in the haystack. I might put a little work in, but not anywhere near as much work. It's literally finding the needle in the haystack. So it made that part of the tool a lot easier for us. When we look at what AI is doing for us now, it's really more about having skills and functions at your disposal that aren't just go find me the needle in the haystack. Now I have a needle. What do I do with this thing? Well, sew me a shirt. Use this now in some way. We know how people use needles, so go sew me a shirt. And AI would then do that. So like the difference here now is like, I can not only go get information, but I can put all that information to work. The thing I found I can actually use now in a meaningful way without having to have that exact skill myself. And that's what's kind of new for people, is people that didn't used to be able to paint can paint pictures now. People that didn't used to be able to write software can write software now. People that didn't used to be able to make a roadmap can maybe make a roadmap now. The difference being is you still need the vision and the thought and the creativity, the strategy, the understanding of the problems, and the people who are or care about what you might be off to go build. All matters. We are not yet at the point, and this may be one of the hardest things to obtain, where I just describe at a high level a problem I have and the perfect solution just appears, right? Like I have to have a point of view or an opinion on the solution of the problem and even the severity of the problem before whatever I produce would even matter. That's where we're starting to see like, yes, there's new tools. If you haven't spent a whole lot of time with all of these tools, then you might still think this is just a really sophisticated way to get the needle out of the haystack. And maybe it's even faster than the old way. But the real horsepower here is being able to do something with the hay and do something with the needle that you never dreamed of before, of being able to do it. You might have dreamed it, but you might not have had any means of doing something with it. And now you're like, okay, great. I have all the ingredients. I don't necessarily have to have the know-how. I just have to have enough vision to say, this is the outcome I need to have happen. And I know this is the outcome I need because I understand the problem. I understand the people I'm solving it for. And so the thing I can produce with these tools, it has real value. It's not just me saying like, hey, I really hate when this happens, AI tool. Bring me a solution that solves this problem exactly. And by the way, go solve it without my input and come up with the perfect thing. The person crafting that's going to be really interesting. And yes, these are those tools where now it's like, as you lean in, it's really about, I can have the tool bring me the thing or do the thing that I don't really have the capability of doing myself, but I still have to be able to envision the thing. I have to understand the problem, and I have to know when it's right, which is a very tricky thing about these tools.
The example of search is really helpful, I think, for folks who are trying to wrap their heads around the current state of the union with AI. And if you are a leader, if you are a builder, an entrepreneur, if you're trying to just wrap your head around, okay, what do I do with everything that's happening right now? I do think that's super helpful to roll back the tape a little bit and remind ourselves that the earliest iterations of this type of technological horsepower was really rooted in being able to find and access information, right? We have now moved to a point where it has become a means of production. So there's a few key forces that are worth acknowledging is that we've evolved to the AI being a means of production. It can now create and make things, whether that be content or design, visuals, all that sort of stuff. It's also happening at an unbelievable velocity. Every day we hear about some other area of our life being touched with this layer of AI in some way, shape, or form. So the pace of the iteration is certainly intense. That's new. And then the democratization of the access to the tools. So these things are now just available behind .coms and .ios that we can all just hit from our phones. And in many cases, you can use them for free. So all of those forces are now in the stew, which is wild. Because I think if you kind of zoom out far enough to see that, there's no other way to think of this moment in time than absolutely revolutionary. And revolutionary in a different way than I would say people were talking about NFTs or the blockchain, let's say, or AR, VR, a few years ago. Not to say that there were not real technological leaps that occurred, but there was a different kind of veneer on those storylines versus what it is with kind of AI, I would say. This is a much more sturdy iteration of technology from my point of view, at least, which kind of gets me to another question. As people who work in supporting roles, oftentimes you and me, to help people navigate what comes next in whatever their lane of work is, how would you suggest that somebody, whether they're a leader or a lieutenant or a bench player, how would you suggest somebody just get started down this path of starting to feel and interact and expose themselves to these tools in a way that's actually helpful? And I heard myself say expose themselves, so not that, but to actually start to use these things in a way that might help them move a little further down the path of progress in being additive to whatever work they're trying to do. How does someone get started?
One of the things that you mentioned this, right, is that it's like, it's very accessible. And just to take a beat on this, some of those things that you mentioned that were like these kind of promises of big inflection points, whether it was NFTs or AR, VR, blockchain, whatever, mostly inaccessible stuff. Like I didn't really know how to make those things. I don't really know how to get at this stuff. They were still limited to like a pretty closed group of people who could even do much with that. When we look at some of these inflection points that really included, let's say, everybody, right? There's a few of them that we've bumped into, and I think they're all kind of indicators of what might be to come, right? We talked about the internet and search, right? Giving everybody information. And then we talk about, in some ways we talk about like mobile. Everybody's got a computer in their pocket with access to everything. So there's that. And that affects everybody. Everybody plays a role in that, right? So now, as a result of that, we also have all these content producers in a way we've never had before. We have more photographers, we have more videographers, we have more, video celebrities and all of these things than we've ever had, ever in human history. This next phase of a fully accessible to everyone solution that is a big inflection point is now making us not just creators in the sense of like I can create a photo or I can create a video and I can go publish it on YouTube or Instagram and become famous. I can become a star. I can take my passion and turn it into a thing that the way 30 years ago was literally impossible. There's no way you could do that. And now we're looking at production in a whole nother way. Yeah, you can still do that. I can make music. I can make videos. I can make photography, studios. I can do all these things that I be able before. But now I can actually do things that are even outside my own skill lane. The ability to write a piece of software or to design something beautiful that you can imagine in your head, but you just don't have the skills to do it. Like imagine for those of us, I know you're a musician, Jamie, but for those of us who are completely unskilled in the art of playing an instrument, let's say, I can imagine what it would be like for me to play the guitar and sound awesome. I cannot do that without a tremendous amount of training and even then I may never get there to the people that I aspire to be like. And yet this is a tool that everyone can use, and it doesn't require decades of skill and experience other than the passion, the creativity, the vision of that experience is really powerful. But as far as honing the skill, a big part of this right now is it's moving at such a ridiculous pace that, whether you're listening to this, in late 2024 or 25 and you've got, next year, 2 years down the road, AI is moving at a ridiculous velocity. So there's probably things happening literally right now as we're recording this that are going to change things that used to be impossible and that are now possible. So it's moving super fast. That's the part to look at, right? As you're trying to think about like, how do I go into this, whether I'm dabbling in it now or I'm maybe even leaned in pretty far, is how do I really get going on this from my own point of view of what's possible and what I can do? You almost have to take off our natural filter of things being hard or impossible. Like if I hand somebody who doesn't know an instrument, I'll say, here, play this guitar. Here's a quick, I'm gonna give you a quick rundown on it. Go play this guitar. It would be daunting. You'd be like, ooh, I don't think anything good's gonna come of this at all. Like this is gonna be super hard. I'm gonna probably fail pretty spectacularly, and there's probably very little chance that I'm gonna figure this out. And I think sometimes there might be the thinking that, oh, this is some tool maybe too sophisticated for me to even use. Or, yeah, I get that, I use ChatGPT to ask about, basic assistant things or go be a, search 5.0 type of a result or whatever else, I might look at that. But the fact is that you can go in and create. And even the most average person from an AI capability standpoint can do amazing things in there. And some of this is just going like, okay, this is built so that if I have passion and vision and strategy and I have the willingness to want to solve something that I understand, if I can give enough information to something that I can shape this into that solution. And the reality is you can. So it's like some of it's just go, like and start developing that thing, because there is a little bit of a language that you have to learn of how do I talk to this tool. You mentioned natural language. Some of us might find it's not supernatural when you start doing it. You start like, I have to talk like this machine understands things and I have to learn how to speak that way and I'll get the results that I want. And that becomes part of the repetition and the skill there. But if you think you can't make the photo that you can just dream up in your head, or if you think you can make like a 2-minute video of promoting something you can think of, or if you think you can't write a mobile application that works, you're wrong. That AI tool exists right now. You can go in and do those things. And as you lean in and start doing that, it starts getting easier, starts getting more familiar. You start uncovering the next tool that's going to help you do even better than that. There's not a person that would be listening right now that doesn't have the ability to go in and use these tools and produce those things. Now, the level of goodness that comes out of that depends a lot on who you are, where your passion is, what things you wholly understand, all of these things. But the reality is you can go in there, you can take that picture and produce an awesome photograph, even if your whole life has not been about becoming a tremendous photographer.
Yeah, a really interesting distinction that we all, I think, have to wrap our heads around and maybe wrestle with, especially if we are builders and creators and we are leading teams or managing people. the world we are coming from is a world where a lot of value was placed on just being able to be the producer of a thing. That the asset was your ability to deliver a task, was your ability to create a very specific thing. If I'm a freelance graphic designer, in many ways, my value could be that I'm the person you turn to when you need to go make a logo. And we're just acknowledging that that's not where the value sits anymore. Now, just producing the logo is not the asset. That's not the area to go build a moat around and try to differentiate yourself. I can do that here at my desk if I need to. I can go make 1,000 logos using any number of tools to do it today. So, in a world where creating a logo is no longer the problem, where's the value? When I can go make 1,000 logos, is that what the value was in the first place? I would argue that much of the value is actually, well, who has the ability to understand what logo means something? Who has the ability to understand what that logo's application is going to mean to yourself or your business or your client or whoever, that logo is intended to represent? The value story moves away from our ability to be producers of stuff as the key differentiator, instead into an area of, well, who has the taste, the judgment, the ability to discern what we should be making, how it should be packaged up, and in what order we should be making that stuff in, and in what sequence should I put these things together in order to address or try to solve some very real problem that maybe wasn't as addressable a few years ago. Because to your point, we now all have access to a tool or a set of tools that can likely do nearly anything you can think of. If your starting point is, man, I really wish I could go to my desk and make a bleh, blank insert thing. The more interesting question becomes, okay, well, if you can do that, what are you going to choose to do today? I would encourage anybody who, hasn't even started dabbling with some of these tools, which I'm sure most folks have, that's a great way to start. Yeah, go dabble. Start giving inputs into a tool like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and start to feel the outputs. One of my favorite things to just acknowledge is that it always gives you an output. There's never been a time when I put something in where it doesn't give me something back. That's kind of interesting because it means perhaps at some level, if I want to do like a glasses half full version of that, is, boy, that's an incredibly helpful way to go from 0 to 1 with an idea, a concept, a task, even if that's what I'm using it for. But I think the level up from that is once you've spent some cycles dabbling with these tools and feeling what it's like to give input and get outputs, the next level is about to what degree can you really apply your unique ability to have taste and judgment and discernment to start using AI tools as a strategic thought partner. Because really, that's the common unifying thread in all of this. And you could argue has always been the case throughout history. To your point about photographers, we still have photography. That is still a craft. We probably have less photographers, and frankly, it probably takes more to be a, air quotes here, successful. I've built a career as a photographer, let's say. 100 years ago, you could be a photographer because you were the dude or the guy or the gal who owned the camera in the town. That made you the photographer. So that's not the case anymore, right? So we're not building our moat around just the asset because that's not the problem anymore. Now it's about which photographers out in the world know how to capture the family photo I'm looking for on this particular beach in this particular setting at this particular time of year. I mean, there are people who do that. They're that specialized in the role of photography that's how they've carved a lane, for themselves. And I guess my point is being able to get to a place like that requires skills that are far more familiar to us as humans if we zoom out a little bit and recognize, the ability to think critically about a problem, to spend cycles trying to identify problems in the first place, and really be thoughtful about empathizing with the end user or the end customer. Critical thinking, strategic thinking, that is a far more valuable frame to approach AI tools that we have access to today, in my opinion. Because if we start to then interact with those tools through that frame, AI as my strategic thought partner, I think to your point, we get to far more interesting places far more rapidly than we have been able to do in our history. And it reminds me that a conversation I've had with a few different people in different companies at times is about the coding language worth knowing in the world to come. And I've said, yeah, the language worth knowing is English, is is your ability to be a super communicator and think about what it takes to actually sculpt, whether that's a prompt or a series of questions or a narrative that starts to describe the types of outcomes that are big picture, even that have lots of perhaps moving parts. Your ability to articulate those things in your interaction with a tool that has a crazy high horsepower AI engine underneath it is going to be really valuable. And again, that approach is strategic. That's different than make me a logo that has a pickle and an umbrella and some confetti falling from the sky that says Jamie's Pickle Shop. That's helpful to a degree, but I can't spend all my cycles doing that all day long, or else I'm not really, I would argue, unlocking the full potential of what these tools might provide today. And again, that's a very glasses half full version of the AI story at this moment in time. I understand that, like all iterations, all leaps in technology, to your point, it is going to come with a fair amount of disruption in categories that are ripe for disruption because of how they're fundamentally structured. So I'm not discounting that.
There's a couple things there. One would be, ironically, in some ways, because of the way we're interfacing with a machine, let's say, is that the skill that is one of the skills that's most valuable in the workplace is communication. And communication is the way that you operate AI. When you can clearly articulate what you want, your chances of getting it are really good, and you'll just get better at that. You'll continue to work that. Now, I think you talk about glass kind of half full. I think there's no question that what we're going to see in the continuing in the half full side, and I'll touch on the half empty in a second, but on the half full side, we are at the edge of an opportunity where even in the grandest vision of what these tools can become, the most important thing is we're going to have hundreds of millions, if not billions, of new producers in the world that were previously not producers of content, of solutions, of software, of digital things, right? In some ways. And some of those digital things can be used to do physical things as well. But even just sticking through the lens of something to your point, I could sit down at my desk and make it if I just had the skills and the time, right? That suddenly AI gives you those things. And so, yes, are we going to produce a lot more like bad things or things that aren't well received by the marketplace? Sure, that we'll have more of those things. But we will also have solutions to problems we've never been able to solve before because there was never enough juice in it to make it worthwhile for a company or an organization or somebody with resources to go make happen. And so even in this very rapid, couple of decades that we're coming out of here, where tons of startups, tons of innovation, tons of inflection points, all of these things, it's still been kind of kept to people who are able to get something funded, or an organization that's willing to invest in whatever that solution might be. And so the ability to bring something to market, whatever that might mean, was still limited in some ways, unless you're producing for Instagram or YouTube or one of the platforms that had kind of solved for this in some ways, where you had an outlet. In order to produce the kinds of things we're talking about here, we're adding now an incredible amount of talent into the pool that was never really in play before. It might have been covered up at some organization somewhere where somebody's just like bumping up against the ceiling, tons and tons of talent, but it's just kind of stuck in their job or whatever else it might be. But the opportunity is really going to be kind of overwhelming in the sense of like, if you want to produce and you have a desire to solve a problem and you wholly understand the problem and who it's for, your opportunity to go do that is incredible. You can make that happen without having to know code, without having to know how Photoshop works, without having to, understand how to use Canva or PowerPoint or whatever. There's all these things. It's like, you don't have to have these skills. You have to have a vision and the ability to articulate that vision, and then great things can happen. So in that sense, I think it's important for people to realize you might be a producer in the world of AI tools. You don't even know it yet because you just haven't leaned in to find out where those opportunities and limits are that you might think are there. If you have a passion for something and you can articulate it, these AI tools are going to blow your mind depending on how far you're willing to go down the rabbit hole. You can go as far as you want to go. Now, just real quick on the half empty side, right? There's no question that large organizations are going to have a decision to make which is, do I use AI as a force multiplier with the team I have and grow at a ridiculous rate, bring more to market, drive more revenue, grow, grow, grow? Or do I continue to producing at the velocity that I'm at right now because that's working pretty good for me, but I do it with a lot less resources than I did before? So my resource pool contracts, my output doesn't really change that much. There's a benefit there, obviously, to the organization. When that happens, you're going to have affected people. No question. There are going to be affected people when an industry shifts in a fundamental way. But kind of to the earlier conversation, you might be faced with the fact of that I was impacted by an organization who made this decision. They decided I was part of the work that can be automated, and so now I'm out. And there may be opportunities now unlike any other, which is, I think, what you're going to see is, even if you don't have all of the ambition in the world to do it yourself, right? We've seen that before, where someone, you get riffed in an organization and you finally start your food truck that you always dreamed of, and there's all these fun success stories of things like that. And those things will happen too. But it doesn't have to be a go it alone thing, right? The idea is now you might be a more sophisticated cog in a much smaller machine that does want to go punch way above its weight class, right? I want 10x the output of what the team like this could have given me before. And as a member of a team like that, you might be completely invigorated by that, right? Like if you work in an organization right now where your role is something that could be automated and will be automated and might be eliminated, there's a tremendous opportunity where the reason it has now unlocked a sea of opportunity that either you can go join something, maybe a smaller organization that does want to I want to punch above my weight class, like at a ridiculous rate. And I just need one more or two more interesting cogs who can articulate a really clever vision and help understand what we're trying to do here. And those things will be popping up all over the place, right? It doesn't have to be funded with $10 million of venture capital or $1 million of seed money from your rich uncle or whatever. Like, this is something that nights and weekends, things like that, you can start doing some pretty phenomenal stuff, like even preparing for an outcome of maybe my job gets automated. But you should be very aware of that today, right? Like if your job is all I do is edit photos, that's my job. Or if my job is, to your point, like all I do is deliver a few logos to somebody who asked me for one and based on exactly what they said. Or, I edit documents for typos and these kinds of things. Like, okay, chances are that job's going to get an automation that is going to remove that human need. And if you don't have an opportunity in that organization to grow, where you're like, oh, Jaime, you've always been an incredible visionary at this organization. I know we've had you editing documents all this time, but I want to put you over here so you can be a major producer over on this side. That might happen to some folks, right? But for those who end up in your job got automated, lane, the opportunity that exists in the marketplace is going to be huge. And as long as you're not just satisfied being I really just, all I ever wanted to do in life was edit documents for typos and grammar. And that's, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life now, because that was my hope and my dream. And I'd already achieved it. And boy, I thought it was going to be, I was going to be set. And now I've got to rethink my whole life. Sure, there's going to be some of that, right? Like, yeah, that was probably going to happen anyway, regardless of whatever AI does to us. And so this is an opportunity now to be like, where's my passion? Can I get good at articulating my passion and my ability to identify and solve problems and lean into these tools and actually start honing that craft of being able to speak in the ways that produce the things that I can imagine, and then how I might do that in collaboration with like even a few other people. And we can operate as if we're like a pretty big organization. And now there's a very interesting thing. We have kind of a level playing field. We have some of the smartest people in the world who weren't even given the opportunity to do these things are now going to be able to do it. I think we should expect amazing things, but plan for the fact that automation is going to occur. And that if you really are in a lane that says like, yeah, this job is probably going to get automated, find that passion that you've got and start looking at how can I apply this in some different ways, and developing that skill now is really important.
I mean, it's certainly a glasses half full version of the storyline right now. I don't disagree with it, but what I think is worth noting, and I'm pretty sure it's Scott Galloway who says this, and he's fond of saying this, but I think it's a good analogy, is that AI has really become like the Ozempic of the corporate world, right? Like GLP-1s switch off the signal in your brain that says you need to eat more. AI does a pretty good job of suppressing the appetite to hire more, reducing company operating costs, all that sort of stuff. I think that is true. But to your point, maybe the silver lining there, the optimist's approach to it is it gets us closer to a conversation. I mean, not to get kind of, meta about it for a second, but it gets us closer to a conversation about purpose, about to what degree do any of us approach the work that we do through the lens of, am I trying to build and create, bring forth a life that I'm proud of, to be additive to the culture that I'm a part of, in the community that I'm a part of? Those outcomes certainly get far more interesting when you remove the barriers of entry into the means of production, of being able to create things. To your point of time spent going back to your desk thinking about, well, what am I really interested in? Or what areas of the world do I think I could be helpful if I just leaned in a little bit more? And maybe what kept me on the sidelines was some notion that I wasn't able to deliver on this particular skill, or I lacked this particular asset. I don't have the right website. I don't have the right way to get what's in my head out in a visual form some way. Well, that gets really interesting when suddenly you can, because the tools are there. It does move the conversation, I think, a little bit closer to that conversation of purpose and doing meaningful work, which is not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. And that's just a part of our sort of human experience, I would argue. Not everybody on the roster is here to go fundamentally change the trajectory of our human experience here on Earth. That's not everybody's job. That's all right. But for those who want to look down that path, you certainly have more opportunity than ever before to become, with you and your laptop, to become a high horsepower means of production and making things. It kind of reminds me of, I'd be curious to know what you think of the analogy, but it reminds me of the role of a conductor in an orchestra. And I'm not a conductor, and I don't pretend to know a ton about, the symphony or classical music. But the idea that the conductor, I'm assuming the conductor does not play every instrument in the orchestra. I mean, maybe some do, I don't know. But I would imagine that what a conductor is really good at is understanding how to sequence and orchestrate the various instruments to deliver an outcome, to deliver an experience. And that experience might be, oh, we're all playing the notes of Mozart together in this particular way. But I know that not every conductor delivers Beethoven's Fifth Symphony the same way. I mean, in fact, that's not even really arguably why we have the symphony in the first place. We don't have a problem anymore about hearing Beethoven, but we still go to the orchestra. We still have people that find value in gathering to play a song together that way. The conductor's role in a world like that, I think, is a really interesting analogy, or at least it's helpful to me, because I think it speaks to what degree can you start to identify perhaps, yourself, but even to your point, the others who are interested in being conductors, who are interested in approaching their work and the areas of interest that they have through that lens of, hey man, I might be able to pull together a roster of oboe players and French horns and flutes and this and that or whatever to together cohesively deliver an experience that either adds value, adds joy, or removes pain, removes friction to some population, to some customer, to some audience somewhere. And that's an opportunity that we've just never had before at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think your conductor point is really interesting because, and again, there's so many analogies to this. I don't know that everybody always ties it back to this, but the idea that there's always been this kind of walled garden or this kind of gatekeeping that goes on, no matter what it is, it's always there. We've talked about, the fact that, 50 years ago, we had a few TV networks and a few movie studios, and that's where everything came from, everything. And it's a very small amount of people that were the conductors of that industry, right? Making those things happen. And, as cable television came and more networks came, and then, more studios kind of came to that, it created more jobs, more and more conductors. Like, it might have been, those conductors may have been there, but now they were able to go conduct. They weren't just working for another conductor somewhere, right? The limit, there was a limit to how many people could be conductors. And then that limit increased, and cable brought more conductors in that world, right? And then the internet came, and now even more, right? YouTube, Netflix, there's unlimited studios and production capabilities out there. And so now there's ever more in that world, there's more conductors than ever, because now not only do you, in the initial inflection point, which was, let's say, the cable TV to the internet path, where a lot of the same people were involved. You were just pulling more people from that industry, right? Like all of a sudden, more in that people in that industry were involved at the production or like the conductor stage than there were before, because there was only a few lieutenants or generals that could be in those roles. And now there's more. And as the internet came, there is even more. And now as we go into AI, there's going to be an order of magnitude more producers, conductors, people in those roles, right? And so that before I will take a turn and go into the glass half empty piece on this, I will say that is where I think the future state of this being so interesting and compelling is, I think anybody who's worked in an organization, especially a big one, and there's like a finite amount of the conductors, let's say, to keep your analogy going. You look across your organization and think, man, there's way more smart people than these people. Like, these guys over here are incredible. Those guys are incredible. But yet we're kind of beholden to the organizational structure that says, these are the people who drive the vision. These are the people who execute the vision. And in a world where we compress the people who execute the vision because there's automation that happens, what we're doing is putting conductors out into the world with their own symphony at their disposal, right? Of being like, that should give people a lot of optimism as to the fact of like, that path is about to open up, and you can kind of plan for that to be coming. And so, the ability to unlock the talent of all of the conductors around the world will be really, really cool. Now, there's a very specific, I think, half empty side of this coin, which is that we did say that, like if your job was, or if your idea was, my job that I'm happy with, that gives me everything I need today to do what I want to do. I've got my family, I've got my home, I've got my bills paid. I don't aspire to be a trillionaire. I just want to have a good life and do my things. And my job allows for that. And I may be heading toward automation, making that job go away. And so what does that really mean for me? I'm not a conductor, Jamie. I'm about to lose what's probably the job that would have just kept me going, and I would have been super stoked about it. And if it goes away, I really don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to be a conductor. I don't have that strategic vision. I haven't really thought about the fact that I know what everybody's problems are and that I can maybe solve some of them in some way. And so how do I fit in a world that does that? There's a corporate contraction, and it puts me in a place where the skills I've got and the passions I have don't really line up with this new shape of the world. And I think that's where people could have some real fear, right? If that's your lane, my day-to-day life is really good. I feel like I'm on the path for, I don't want for a lot more than I have, and I'm pretty satisfied. But my job might fall right squarely in this automation and reduction phase that's coming. And that might be a super scary thing. And I super empathize with that, right? Because you're like, look, I'm happy. And now I have never sat in my job every day saying, whoa, I just sure wish I had the VP of marketing's job. I was actually pretty happy being a production designer. And now that might be a limited opportunity somewhere. The nugget I guess I would offer there is, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be all of these like micro organizations using these tools with all of these conductors going to work. And now suddenly the ability to have a valuable team player who can do the work of 4 or 5 people with the right tools is going to be in high demand. Because I got so many conductors, I got to have saxophone players now, and I'm going to go find them somewhere, wherever they are. Just to completely bury this analogy, I'm going to go find that skill that I need. And so that's another thing to think about, is that yes, it's easy to get scared of thinking the jobs are going away. Jobs are going away because they're going away at the companies we know of today. What's happening is the jobs that are going to appear at the companies we've never even thought of are going to arrive. Whether you want to be the conductor or you want to be play a specific instrument, your opportunities are going to flatten out quite a bit. You're not going to be like, well, I can go work at these 5 companies in my area and that's it. Now there might be 50 of those or 500 of those, but people who are like, they're starting to chase the dream, and I need people to run with me and collaborate with me and be part of this. And that's where I think you can find optimism, even if you're not like, well, I'm going to be the person who goes and solves this problem. That might feel scary, but knowing that there's going to be tens or hundreds of millions of more people trying to solve problems, they're going to need help. And that's going to be an opportunity where you can go find those emerging organizations. And I might be an organization of 3 people, but they might need 4, right? And in the world of AI, an organization of 10 that can operate like 100 or 1,000, that's the win, right? That's why the Ozempification of corporation is that going from 10,000 to 1,000 is their dream. And you might say, well, I want to go from an operation of 10 to 100, and I can do 1,000 people's work, right? And I can just do it with this handful of people. So I think that's the pivot that doesn't always get addressed in the scariness of being, the corporations are going to reduce, and that's going to leave all these people out in the cold. When the reality is, I think what we're going to see is way less super big corporations controlling everything. And now you don't even have to have the barrier of entry of somebody who's super savvy at raising $5 billion to go chase their startup dream and bring a handful of people with them. Is this can absolutely be a 1, 2, 3, 4 people initiative where everybody's found a lane and they know how to collaborate and do amazing things together. And you just have to be willing to apply yourself into that lane and be part of that, because I think that's where we'll be. And then the last thing I'll say on that is I'm fairly confident that of all these tens or hundreds of millions of people that are going to now embrace AI as producers, pretty confident that not all of those people are going to be trying to do something good. And that is going to produce opportunities as well. As we've seen all these inflection points that we've seen in the last few decades, it's not always just everybody's just going to have more new jobs and then this new thing's going to happen and all this positivity in the lane of industry is going to happen. There's always the counter to that, which is people using it to do bad stuff or create problems. So the other part of this is you might not have a problem you understand how to solve today. There might be a whole new problem 2 years from now that you'd be well equipped to solve with these same tools. So a lot of this is finding those small organizations, finding those opportunities where there's an ember, firing up somewhere in your area, or in your area of expertise, as the case may be. Being part of a team of 4 doing the work of 100 would be pretty exhilarating, even if your job that you have today gets eliminated.
That's an interesting way to close out that beat of the glasses half full versus glasses half empty, because I think in many ways, like many iterations via technology over the arc of human history, in many ways those advancements driven by technology are often mirrors. In many ways they reflect back to the world our own human nature, just through the lens of this new piece of tech. So to your point, AI will certainly empower and activate and throttle up the amount of bad actors, flood the market with mediocre content across the board, water down areas of creative work that historically were protected because they felt in many ways they were immune to being watered down, but now they can be because we can all do it. And certainly there will be villains. Certainly there will be people who look to deploy AI to truly be a bad actor, to do harm, to do damage, to corrode, to ultimately try to eat away at our community or culture or all of those things. So we know that to be true. It's probably worth maybe saying it out loud to each other and trying to have those conversations as people. I don't know if I necessarily bump into a whole lot of those interesting, meaningful conversations in that area. I've seen some people that I think are doing really, really great work in trying to facilitate those conversations. But to your point, maybe that's an opportunity. If there's somebody listening or somebody out there, somebody that has a unique ability to just build community and pull people together and cares a lot about having these types of conversations, well, gosh, I don't want to hear that you're struggling to make that reality real because you can't build a website or you don't know how to put together a newsletter. I mean, that's kind of the point we're making, right? Is to what degree are you willing to walk through that door and be thoughtful about your approach to a thing? And if you identify the things that would help you further down that path, whether that's creating logos or websites or whatever, you have more access than ever before to do it. But, and maybe that's kind of where you were going with some of that, is there's also opportunity for us to address head on the problems that are absolutely going to come our way in a world where AI is stitched into every corner of our human experience, because it's going to touch every corner of our human experience, the good stuff, the bad stuff, the ugly stuff. So there's going to be new opportunities for the good guys or the good actors to come try to do good work, to put out those fires and be the firefighters when something's on fire, in this particular area. Not to stay on the glasses half empty track longer, but it's probably worth a bit more. You and I spend a fair amount of time in the world of media creation, because often we've worked in marketing lanes, we've worked on behalf of media companies who are producing content, who are making media and putting media into the world to try to either build a flat out media business, or they're using media and content to support some other business activity, some marketing activity, or some other area of their business is bolstered up by being able to create, publish, and ultimately disseminate media. What do you think? I'll kind of offer my take on this briefly, but what do you think are some of the very real challenges, maybe glasses half empty things worth considering, purely through that lane of I'm a creative person. I make creative work. What happens to me when everybody can write, when everybody can produce video, audio, text, images, when the act of creating media, that bar has been lowered so much? I mean, we hear about the market being flooded with everything from deep fakes and really hazardous stuff to just kind of average, crappy, sloppy stuff. And it's not really helpful. What are you supposed to do if you're a creative? If you're a musician, if you're an artist or craftsperson to some degree? I mean, I would argue it's not dramatically different than we talked about photographers, but let's pick something else. I mean, it could be ditch diggers who suddenly had to look at what their work meant when steam shovels showed up, right? Well, is the value as me as a ditch digger the fact that I can put a shovel into the earth and move the dirt? Because that's what the steam shovel does now. It does a way better job of that. Or was my value in my ability to understand why this ditch was being built in the first place, or the person who hired me to build this ditch, what they were really trying to solve? It sort of brings those fundamental questions of deeper intrinsic value to the table. So I do think a glass is half empty storyline that is worth trying to explore more is what should the state of the union with AI today mean for creatives, people who view themselves as creatives, who consider themselves people who go to work every day and do a creative type of work. Maybe it's writing, maybe it's art to some degree, maybe it's music, text, images, audio, video. They are creating media in a world where the barrier to entry is so low and the marketplace can be flooded with media of every way, shape, or form. How would you suggest somebody in that lane approach their work, or think about the value of their work, or what their own intrinsic value is to the marketplace in a world when AI can do all this stuff?
I think a lot of that is going to come down to is that what are you really good at and what do you want to be good at, right? Like, so I think creatives have seen, I mean, these last few decades for creatives have been really interesting in the sense that it used to be that your ability to write a book was a skill, right? Like you could theoretically now write a really bad book and produce a 1,200 page thing that nobody ever wanted to read. You could do it, right? You could punch it out pretty easily. We've seen this with video content and photography now for at least the last 10 years. So basically everybody is a videographer and everybody's a photographer, and maybe everyone is some kind of an editor in that world as well. And yet the skill really isn't about recording the video or pushing the button on your camera or whatever. Like, that's not the skill, right? We don't pull up like, oh, I'm the best at pushing the button on a camera, or I'm the best at holding the button down on a recorder of some sort, right? That's my thing. Like that's not it. And that hasn't been for a while. So I think where we're going to find is, just like we do today, is that we're already overwhelmed with the amount of content out there. Like, there's already more video content than I can consume. There's already more audio content than I can consume. And there's a lot of mediocre to like really poor content out there. It's there. If you're aspiring to lean into that skill you have, or the creative juices you've got, you kind of have the same challenges you do right now, which is how do you break through? And the way you break through is to be exceptional, or to be unique in some way, or to have something that someone else just doesn't have. And that's been the case for a really long time. Now, it's not always fair, right? Like we've both been very, very close to the music industry, and you could argue some of the very best artists never became popular. I've seen people play that are unbelievable to 12 people, right? I mean, you're just like, wow, this is an incredible talent that it just hasn't crossed over for whatever reason. We all know there's a long list of those things. But, so in some cases you're going to have, the Instagram model that dominates the new photography scene, or you're going to have the new wacky YouTube prankster is dominating video where it used to be Martin Scorsese or whatever, right? Like, I mean, there's some ways that we might say the way we measure success is maybe skewed, right? How many views, how many followers, how many whatevers, versus just how good is it, right? Like, and what kind of quality is this? And so some of that goes to your standards. What's your measure of success? Is it that I can actually produce my art in the way that I want? that might be really enabling with some of the AI tools. You might be better at that. You might produce a better record, a better song, a better graphic, a better poster, a better whatever, because you have just more horsepower than you had before. You aren't limited by, well, how many different versions of this track can I mix? How many different layers of this photo can I manage? Like whatever, that now gets unlocked. So your creative horsepower now is just amplified. So I would think for creatives, that piece is light at the end of what might seem like a dark tunnel. Is that, oh no, now everybody can use AI to produce a photograph or a piece of art or a song or even a video. Like, I mean, there's people that are just prompt based. You know, I've got prompt based movies are coming, right? That will be there. I'll watch a video that has been completely prompt based. But whether it's good or not will still depend on the people who did it, who made it, right? There's nothing to say that Martin Scorsese couldn't write an incredible prompt based movie that he didn't shoot a single film of. He's probably not going to do that, but I'd sure watch it, right? I'd want to be involved I'd want to see what happens out of that because of the talent behind it and what they do with it. And so I think it's still going to come down to that, right? Like you still have to have talent. You still have to have passion. You still have to have the willingness to go lean in and make it. And you're going to be in a sea of noise, which has kind of been the case now for a really long time. I think what we can hope is that our ability, like we talked about, where AI and how AI and search are somewhat connected. Where like I use when the search sophistication came, it gave me the ability to go get the needle in the haystack, and the AI gave me now unlimited ability to do things with those things that I found. I think we might be looking at there's another evolution of this as well, where AI might also help connect me to these creatives that I never could connect with before. That we can think about it because that's now a new problem, right? That we can go solve. A new problem is we have all this new creation going on. What's good? Like what's the good stuff? What should I be paying attention to? And if you approach that as a new problem that gets solved, we might say that creatives might have the greatest green field ahead of them that they've ever had, which is you might be a phenomenal artist at producing phenomenal content and you've never been able to break through with the noise. And the new problem might be, hey, how do we go find all these and connect them to the people that really would love it? And now, as you might, 5 years ago, you might have been the band that tours all the little venues and you make a couple $100 a night and you get a little bit of the food and beverage and your 22 friends and their buddies show up and you just can't quite hit the festival circuit or get the album that breaks or whatever. And it just never happens. But all the skill and passion and creativity was there. This might now be the lane, right? You go make the stuff even better. It's a true representation of your vision. And then you can also get connected to exactly the people who crave that, who appreciate it, who want it, and want to be part of that. And that might be the piece that feels scary today. That's like, oh no, what if somebody can prompt their way into a better song than I can play on a stage or whatever, right? Like that's not really the concern. The concern might be is like, if you have your passion, your creativity, you've got all these tools to do it in exactly the vision that you have. The new problem is, how do I connect the audience to this using some of these same tools? And that's kind of the fun part about what's coming, right? We're like, oh no, we have all these problems that are going to come from AI. You're like, awesome. Because you know what we need? We need lots of problems that all of these producers can go solve and can go tackle. And I think that's what's exciting about AI. And no matter what side of the fence you're on of being like, oh no, this is going to be bad for me, or oh my God, this is going to be amazing for me. The thing to think about is those are the problems that we can all lean into and go solve now as a big group of people who have all these amazing tools to go do it. We don't have to wait for Google or Apple or Oracle or Microsoft or whoever go solve this problem for us. We're like, wait, this group of producers is just taking off. They're going to go solve this problem. That's now going to be unlocked. And that's what's exciting about what's ahead of us, I think.
That's a really fantastic point. In the context of there has always been pretty mediocre stuff. So it's not like mediocre stuff is a new idea. There have always been direct to video movies, right? Direct to DVD. Not every film that was made was a big theatrical release, right? So it's not like creatives are facing a new paradigm in the sense that the marketplace has a lot of kind of average subpar stuff. There will be more of that for sure. It just means that the principles around what guides your art and what perhaps points you in a direction that's meaningful for you as a creative might need to get a little sharper and more crystallized. Some of that has to do with scale, I would say, getting comfortable with reach that is not in the hundreds and billions and millions and whatever. Just sort of scale needs to be adjusted. But I think that's fine because it's also acknowledging that the internet fundamentally is not a mass medium. A lot of people want to treat it that way or feel like it's a mass medium, but it's not. It's a bunch of really, really, really small micro organisms that are clustered together. They are micro audiences that gather digitally in an online space. It's not a mass media. We've tried to approach it that way, but it's not. So this notion of finding the others who are truly the ones who lean into your work is a very valuable exercise. And a part of that exercise is getting comfortable with the scale of that audience, maybe not being in the hundreds of millions of billions. And in fact, you could argue it probably shouldn't be, because that gets into the principles of marketing, really about how really our job is to find the people that we think we can serve to the best of our abilities with our skills and our assets and the things we bring to the table, and show up consistently for those people in order to deliver real meaningful value. That is not a storyline for everyone. That's a storyline for someone. That someone might be a big audience, to your point about if Scorsese did a film that was totally prompt based. I bet there would be millions of people who would probably be interested in test driving that. But my point is that still, those millions are still a specific slice. That's not an everyone activity. So I agree with you that the job of the creative professional right now, and I guess I use those words intentionally, a creative professional, capital C, capital P, that because let's face it, just because you are a creative person does not mean that you automatically get the right to go build a career and go build a life. That's just not on the table just because you know how to play the guitar or you know how to paint. And that's okay. But let's say we've decided to be or currently are a creative professional, meaning you show up even when you don't feel terribly creative today and you do your creative work because that's what the professional does. If you are in that lane, there is still an enormous opportunity to see and double, triple down on what I would consider to be the absolutely irreplaceable elements of creative work. And number one on that list for me is judgment, is knowing what's worth making in the first place. That is an act of creative expression and ability, to have judgment, to have a point of view. Yes, we can generate thousands of logos. Who's going to generate the vision to identify the right one that actually matters for the context? Right? Great designers don't just make things look good, they make them work. That's kind of the point there. So judgment. 2, taste, right? Having a point of view, just having taste, know when to break the rules. Think of great chefs in the world, right? They have access to the same ingredients. Great chefs know how to sequence and combine those ingredients to bring forth new recipes presented in new ways that stir emotion and have all of us going, oh man, I've never experienced anything like that before. That's about having taste and a point of view. That is an act of creative work. That's creative expression. And then you mentioned it here too. I think this notion of being meaningful to the others, being able to use your medium to truly connect and like build community and build relationships with people. That is a creative exercise. And I would argue that art, let's just call it art, that a very appropriate definition of what is art can be anything that you create and bring to the world that just might not work. That is an act of art. And that's kind of the point, especially if we live in an age where AI is going to give me a response. If I prompt it, if I give it a question, I'm going to get something. But the idea that we live in a world that is certain, that has known outcomes every single time, is just not true. So the ability for the creative to go, you know what? My art is really my ability to take risks that are forward looking. To what degree can I look into the future and place bets that are artistic bets? That might be a bet that actually is art in some way. It's a piece of creative work, but that could just as easily be a pitch for a new startup. That could easily be just an idea you're trying to introduce into the world. But the idea that we are going to use the capabilities of AI today to help us improve our ability to take risks and to try to bring forth ideas and work into the world that just might not work, that is artistic. And that's hard to do. And it takes those things being introduced into the world for us to move forward as a culture. That's what brings people together. That's how we build culture and community. And if anybody is wrestling with the idea of like, well, how do I make my artistic skill that I have valuable or meaningful in a world of AI today, I would say that that's absolutely a part of it as well. As to what degree can you attempt and take swings that might not work, that might not hit, and place those bets, because that's the only way we build something worth coming together around.
The one last piece is like we still kind of think about this like in the sense of like noise. There's going to be a window here of time, and maybe it will become the new normal for a while, where the amount of stuff that's getting created is exponentially more than what we're seeing even right now, which we're in an era of, from a media perspective, we're seeing an unprecedented amount of stuff created. But that's about to change, because it's not just going to be audio and video and images and things like this, but it's stories and movies and software and websites and all of these things, that we can produce. So the content's going to go way, way up. The part that, again, that we sometimes I think miss, and I kind of have mentioned it as far as like the problems we have to solve, we're about to create, right? Like, so we're kind of in that, we're heading in that lane. So the nice thing is we have these tools that we've never had to go try and solve those problems, right? But one of those problems, in a sense, if we go back to kind of the needle in the haystack times 10, right, is this notion that right now we've always been in kind of because of the way that the web works and because of the way advertising works and the way a lot of this stuff works, we become kind of a snapshot of the sum of the things we do, right? I buy a few things and now I'm labeled one of these, right? Or I read this book and now I'm like this. And so, and that pushes things at me in the sense of being like, oh, Jaime, you bought a swing set recently. I'm going to make all these assumptions about you based on the fact that you did that. And the reason I bring this up is that another part of this, like the AI process of what we're heading into, is the ability to really articulate what you want as a customer, as a consumer, as somebody who wants some of this media out there. There's a sea of media and I want the right thing. And my ability to supply my criteria of what I like is not just limited to, oh, you have a music service and you've played these 10 artists, so therefore you like these artists and things like these artists. Like, well, I have a whole lane of stuff I like outside of that, but that's your narrow view of me, is like that, right? That's me. I'm that person. And so think of where I can go now and say, hey, I like these TV shows, and I've always liked these movies, and I even like some of these directors, and I like some of these actors, and these screenwriters have always been really interesting to me, and I like all this stuff, but I'd really like to have a piece of content. I'd like a show. I'd like a video clip. I'd like something to read. I'd like a song to listen to that's really, really fits those kinds of things that I like in my life, and that I'm telling you about myself on purpose because I want that. And to be able to connect me to a known good piece of creative content out there, some art that I would have never found otherwise. Like, think how limited we are right now to finding art. Like, our ability to find art is really kind of dumb, right? Which is like, oh, you watched a weird documentary on Netflix? Okay, you're into aliens. That's all you watch. We're going to load you up with aliens, right? Or we've all seen it. You buy a gift for somebody, and now you're labeled as the person who like loves bourbon. And you're like, yeah, I bought a bourbon once for somebody, and now I'm the bourbon guy for all the ad stuff. Like, this isn't who we are. And like, yet our whole life is really dictated by small things we've done, amplified into this is now who you are. And our ability now to define what we want, not just what we're going to create, but even the things I want to get. Like, Jaime, if you're going to be like, I'm going to get the band back together, we're going to make some new music. We've got now production tools we've never had before. I can mix stuff like never before. I don't need the studio. We could really kill it. I'm going to put it out in the world. And then the problem is, you mentioned like with marketing. Oh no, now that there's all this content, how do I market? How do I push my content to the person who wants it? What we might be heading toward is a world where it's way easier to go get the content you want without having somebody just blast you with like advertising and suggestions and all these things. I can just like, look, this is who I am. This is what I like. I like this really weird mix of eclectic stuff. And I need to know what qualifies as that's being produced in this new lane of content. And I might find that I've got a whole new layer of creatives, creative professionals, the CPs that exist that I never knew of, I never found before. And today we just accept that those people are just in the ether somewhere. Yeah, I bet there is a really awesome band in Austin I've never heard before that I would love. But guess what? I'm never going to discover them because there literally is no way for me to do that unless I just stumble upon it or I get luck in some way. Where our ability to kind of go get that, I think, is going to fundamentally change in a way that's not just the algorithm, but it's really me saying, like, hey, I really like, Quentin Tarantino movies, and I really like authors that make books like this, and I love these screenwriters, and I love all these things. How can I go get something that's going to satisfy that urge? Good luck doing that today, by the way. Like, that's a super hard task. And that's kind of the fun stuff when you think of AI, is like, it's almost like I have a person, right? Who I'm like, here's all these things that matter to me. Find me the thing that checks all these boxes so that I can lean into it and go acquire the stuff. And then I can also say what I think its level of goodness is. And now all of a sudden there's this organism in the world that's like, I know how to bring you the thing that you want. That is exactly the thing that you want. Now we just need more people to create those things so that I can give them to you. And that gets kind of interesting, I think, really fast. But it goes back to the fact that, as a creative professional, you're going to have to kind of still be good at the things that made you the creative professional, right? You're going to have the same passion, the same vision, the same dedication. You're just going to have more horsepower. I think it's pretty cool that you don't have to be like, oh, yeah, this other guy, they have $1 million studio that they get to work out of. And so by default, they're just going to beat us because we don't have that. That may not be the case in a very short amount of time. Is be like, that's now not an advantage layer, right? Now it's like, well, what if everybody had $1 million studio and a producer sitting there to do all the work? Okay, now we're talking, right? How many creatives want to put their hand up for that, right? I think that's where things get really interesting, right? That's where, unless you're one of the 0.01% of creatives who have all those things handed to them, what an opportunity. Be like, I'll give you the studio, I'll give you the producer, I'll give you a team of graphic design artists, I'll give you all these things. All you have to do is tell me what you want to make, and we'll go help you do that. That's pretty awesome.
That's incredibly awesome. I think we're landing the plane right now, because I think what I heard in that little bit, and I agree with so much of what you just said, are the things that stand out to me as the constants in this moment in time where AI feels like such a disruptive force for so many different reasons. Whether it's the velocity or the actual things it can do or how many different areas of our life it's touching, it just feels chaotic right now. And that's a reasonable emotion for any one of us to feel. But where I think you just took it is helpful. At least it's helpful to me, because it feels like the unifying constant threads that kind of run throughout moments in time that are this disruptive, which are, hey, we may need to embrace that there's real opportunity here for everyone, regardless of what type of work we do Monday through Sunday. But it's on offer to the degree that we want to sign up for a different way of working, for a way of looking at our work through a more strategic, thoughtful, critical thinking type of lens. Because what we're saying is the glass is half full version of what we might be living through right now unlocks an enormous amount of potential for people who want to reframe the work they do and how they do it through a lens that's more about true blue ocean, high ceiling, whatever the right metaphor is. But that requires you to move away perhaps from a more traditional task oriented approach to your work, instead of, what could I do given this kind of tool set where the means of production are truly limitless? What areas of the world am I interested in, and what problems are interesting to me, and what unique capabilities do I have that could be plussed up by virtue of having access to these tools? That seems like the opportunity. And some of those other constants I'm hearing are things like the ability to curate. Your point about trying to connect people to the art or the creative works or just the content, the information that's truly going to be impactful to them or be meaningful, that's an act of curation. So that could be done ourselves. Maybe that's where you were going. We as individuals will have more ability to have a hand in shaping what comes our way and what we want the outputs to be that we choose to consume. But also there's an enormous opportunity for the curators amongst us to gather and collect those things in a way that's super valuable, to help bring organization and structure and help people find that signal amongst the noise type of thing. That's curation as an act of service. I mean, that's a real big opportunity as well. So those types of human attributes, our ability to show up with our work and our ideas and our effort, and try to be empathetic with who's on the other end, trying to be clear-eyed around what the problems we face, trying to approach the work we do when we sit down at our desk, or we walk out the door to go do the work, through maybe a slightly different lens of what's really my job. Is it taking the picture, or is it delivering an idea in a way that makes an impact on the other end? Like those types of things, those are very human constants. So I think where we've spun a bit today, or what at least I'm taking away from this, is those constants are still here in a world where AI is upon us and moving fast and feeling chaotic and all that sort of stuff. And as leaders and shapers and builders of things, we do ourselves an enormous amount of service if we approach our interactions with these tools through some of those constants. That's what I think I'm hearing in this conversation.
I think that's the thing, is that we're at a big inflection point. We've got a sea of opportunity ahead of us, which always creates a certain amount of fear, and trying to understand how that might impact you, and how you embrace this as an opportunity as best as you possibly can. And I think that as we march ahead here, the part to always remember is that, yes, we are going to create a lot of fear and opportunity here. Also going to create a whole lot of problems, and that's what creates the fear, is the anticipation of those problems. But we have an unprecedented set of tools for solving problems, and an unprecedented amount of people who are about to be unlocked to go solve those problems. And I think that should give people a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to navigate what's ahead of us here, not without its bumps and bruises. That's always going to happen. It does. It's happened to every industry and every big inflection point, whatever it might be. There's a period of transition that's painful, and it can be painful for a lot of folks. But I do think that being able to look at this as it's not just a thing that is going to create some problems for us, but it's going to unlock more problem solvers in our history to be able to go out and tackle them with better tools to do it than they've had before. And sure, there's going to be polarizing things that come of this. But the thing that I look to is the fact that I know when you unlock a tremendous amount of high quality talent with new opportunity, good things happen. And they help defend against the challenges and the frustration and the fears and the unknowns that are out there. And it actually gives me a really interesting look at the future to think at how many truly amazing visionaries and strategists and content producers, and you pick your thing, right, that are just sitting somewhere not doing that in some fundamental way. And knowing that we can give an opportunity to those people and start embracing some of their ideas and going out and solving and bringing people with them. I think it's really exciting. And I'm looking forward to see how this plays out, not only the coming weeks and months and years, but it's a really interesting look at the long-term future of society and civilization and technology, and the fact that we're about to inject nitrous into our gas tank here.
Well said, man. Well said. I appreciate you always making time. It's always good to see you. This is Slackers. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Jonathan.
Thanks so much for taking time to listen. Again, check the show notes. Jonathan and I can both be found online. Reach out. Say hello. We love it when people say hi. If you have questions about anything we've covered, or you want to chime in with any comments, we'd love to hear it. Until next time, Jonathan, thank you, brother. Talk to you soon.